here. So what else can the Space Explorer show us? We've seen that I can see all problems. We've seen that I can search through the system to look for any named metadata resources in the system. I can view the modules in the system. I can also look at representations. So for example, this shows me a list of all the declared POJOs that have associated metadata with them. It could be documentation, it could be dynamically generated information. So let's have a look at this HDS. And the HDS is a useful low-level hierarchical tree structure that we can use to build POJO diagrams, POJO objects. And we can see here that I've got a description of the interface. You see it's a representation. It's implemented by this class in that Java package, and we see that the Java doc has been generated for this part of this module, and we can see how the representation's Java doc looks. We can also search and filter and so on as before. The other part of the system that we can look at is we can see all the currently active transports, and a transport is an origin point. It exists on the boundary between the NetKernel address space and the outside world. So this is showing me all of the currently active transports in this system. We can see that I've got some that are quite subtle, like a tool that's a continuation endpoint. I've got others that are more obvious, like an HTTP transport in the front-end fulcrum, another HTTP transport in the back-end fulcrum. We can see we've got another transport here, and so on. I've got an SSH server as well. Let's quickly look at the front-end fulcrum of my system. So here we've got the fulcrum in the enterprise front-end, and I want to look at the details of that module. And we can see in here, if I click on the details of that first space, here's the HTTP transport endpoint that we looked at in the previous view, and we can look at the details of that endpoint, and we can see its current dynamic metadata associated with this runtime. So we can see it's running on port 8443 with an SSL socket. We can see it's got another connector, a standard NIO connector running on port 8080. We see it's not received many requests because I've been working in the back end. We can see the maximum connections, the duration average, and so on. The other thing I can do is go back to my fulcrum view, and I can see a view of who's being exposed to this HTTP transport. And the best way to get that sense of that is to look at the diagram again. So here's the static structure diagram of this view, and we see that it's quite a large diagram. So I'm going to zoom the scale factor down a little so that I can see the overall picture of this. And we see that it's really quite a lot of stuff coming in. And as you'd expect, what I've got is a web server here sitting on the front of my system, and then I've got lots of applications coming through various different architectural layers in the front end, and then application implementations coming in the back end. So for example, let's pick one at random. Let's find out what this application is. So I can click on the space, even though I don't know what the detail of was that. I can zoom in. I can see that it's a demo for a virtual hosting demo, and it's not a particularly good choice to have picked that first one. So let's look for another one. Let's see what this one is. Here's a more interesting one down here. Let's click on this one. And space details. I actually know what this one is already because I can see the general pattern. I can see from the shape of this that there's an entry channel into this application. It splits into two possible channels into the application. There's an implementation space here, and then there's various other functionality going on in the back end of this system. So let's find out what this application is. Click on space details, and I find that it's the Wink web application. So I can go and look at the module details for that, and I can see that there's a lot of spaces involved in this all of which are quite intertwined and interrelated. So I'm going to just concentrate on something, and let's see how it's connected to the control panel. So let's go and look at the Wink control panel space. And here we can see I have various tools in here. I have gzip compression post-process endpoint here, so it's doing some gzip compression. Again, maybe not the best choice to look at, that one. But I can look inside each of these spaces, get a view by looking at its individual diagram as I'm developing it, and see how this particular implementation is working. You see there's a gatekeeper, and there's various relations here, the scratchpad overlay, and so on and so on. So this that completes a kind of view of the Explorer tool. It allows you to go and find and discover parts of your system. So one good example of that is I might be interested in all of the template engines, the wiki template engines that are going to be allowing me to do macros in the wiki application, and I want to find out where they all are. So I can search on wiki template, and here I see a listing of all the possible macro engines that I could use in my system. See, I've got Slidey, the presentation tool, installed. I've got some math tools installed, HTML, so on and so on. So I can see a whole set of these tools, and I can see where they exist. I can then find out how to import them if I want to use them myself. So let's look at that module detail. I can see that's the actual physical location of the module there. If I want to go and actually look at its implementation code, and I've got a very rapid view into different parts of the system with this tool. Well, that concludes the tour. The tool itself is an extensible framework, and these are just some of the plugins that are already finished for it. But expect to see quite a rapid evolution of additional features as we introduce those progressively now that the framework's in place. And of course, let us know your feedback, and you know, if there's particular aspects of the development cycle that we don't think we've covered, or you think we need to refine, then let us know.